Evan Jackson here, Young, Bold, and Regal, and we're here to talk to the people behind Red Summer TV's Tale of the Tape, how the mixtape revolutionized hip hop. And I wanted to ask you guys off the rip, how has the mixtape impacted your careers and your lives, either as the director of this or either as in your solo careers as well?
Yes, first of all, thank you for having us, Evan. We greatly appreciate the opportunity. Great to meet you. Um, yeah, so I mean, the mixtape has greatly impacted my career. I make a living off of hip hop.
Yeah.
Oh, pretty much always have, been a student of the game, as well as a fan for as long as I can remember. And producing, for different platforms from, shows like Rap City, to documentaries on Showtime, Netflix, etc. A lot of them are hip hop based.
Yes.
Um, every artist, DJ, that's worth a damn has really gotten their start from the mixtape. They've had a mixtape that helped catapult their career. So it's been an integral part of my story.
And it's almost unfair to call it an era because, right, when we think that there may be a lull, there is an artist who comes out with a mixtape. So to further the conversation, how fun was it to make this documentary knowing that you have such an array of mixtapes to look at throughout the years?
I
How
mean, go ahead, Kim. I'm
gonna
sorry.
Oh, okay. No, it's okay. I was just gonna answer the first part of the question
Yeah,
and then you
yeah.
could jump in.
Mhm.
So I will say the mixtape, and I know you said don't use the word era, but it was the soundtrack for my coming of age era
Okay.
in journalism, right?
Mhm.
So even before I was writing, I'm gonna say, because I've
Right.
been listening to mixtapes since I was in high school or before that.
Same.
So I think that because it was such an integral part of the culture at the time when I was coming up, it's something that is very nostalgic.
Mhm.
And obviously these days mixtapes are, the definition of mixtapes are different, but I just feel very
Oh,
strongly that
yeah.
yeah, we need to continue to tell our stories.
Yeah, and the reason why I say, it's unfair to call it an era because there is so many golden eras of the mixtape genre, right? You have the late 80s and you have the late 90s where essentially the samplers that you put in your cassette desk in your car, that would honestly be a mixtape because you say, "Hey, this isn't on the album. What's going on?" Right?
Right,
But
right.
as it evolved, right, as more prominent artists started utilizing it, it became a bigger genre. And when I think of mixtape, I think of me walking to school with mixtape Wheezy in my iPod and doing all those things. So getting to the crux of the documentary, um, what are some central moments in the mixtape eras to you that kind of redefined hip hop that had not only artists but executives take a step back and be like, this is a game changer?
For one, a lot of people will say their favorite Wheezy is mixtape Wheezy.
Yes.
And I get into debates all the time because I'm a fan of the Carter. I think the Carter 2 is his best body of work.
Hmm.
Most people would say they'll go to a mixtape. Um, but no, like, the one thing about the mixtape era, so to speak, like
Yeah.
it's really long. It's not like these 3 years here or 5 years
Yeah.
here. To me, it's like a 25 year thing, you
Exactly.
know. But I do think that the rise and ascension of Kid Capri and what he brought to the game from, taking his cues from Brucey B and like that laid the foundation for him and him putting his stamp on things, him making iconic uh, mixtapes like 52 Beats and the like, but also, you know, building his brand, having a label deal, being on HBO with Def Comedy Jam. I think that was a pivotal moment for the culture
Definitely.
that only a DJ and someone with that reach would be able to do. So to me, that's my moment.
Pardon me if Malik just said this, but I definitely am thinking of the 50 Cent G Unit mixtape era, right? I
Uh,
remember how that tape changed the game, how it was distributed as a mixtape, right? And it really sort of redefined how artists were releasing music and solidifying better deals for themselves.
yes. That's a great example because the first mixtape I listened to was by mistake. I asked my friend to give me something new, something fresh. I heard this song called Wanksta by 50 Cent. I need at least, I need at least that one song on the mix CD. And he gave me the whole tape. And at first I was like, bro, this is a whole tape. He's like, relax. You're gonna love it, just trust me. And then from there, it was just an authenticity and a grittiness, not only to the mixtape era for 50 Cent and G Unit, but that's the through line of mixtapes, the authenticity. Talk about how the mixtape connected with the audience, how the album not necessarily did it, but the mixtape did it differently. What made mixtapes unique in that era or as a genre.
So, and from 50 Cent slash G Unit, Dipset, Joe Button with his mood music series, etc. Um, all the way up until, the young legends that we have now, Kendrick Drake Cole, excuse me. I
Hmm.
think that the mixtape allows them certain freedoms because when you are an artist, especially a new artist, signed to a major label, they have a plan for you.
Hmm.
Um, they have producers they want you to work with. There's certain songs they want you to record that are certain BDMs. So that way, that's what get placed on radio because
Yeah.
that's where those marketing dollars are going. But I think with mixtapes, you're allowed to be a lot more free. It's more organic. It's just and it's really a culmination of like all your life experiences on these mixtapes that you put out there first, and that's how you really get your core fan base. And I think it's really important to have that because no matter what, that core audience, whether it's 5 years down the road or 20 years down the road, that's what they want to hear. Last year, it may have been last year, the year prior, you had Drake at the Apollo. He brings out Dipset because he's a huge Dipset fan.
Yeah.
That's Harlem. Everybody wants to hear the Dipset mixtapes. They don't want to hear what they they don't want to hear any nothing from the major labels. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They don't want to hear Cameron Sport Drug and Entertainment and no shots at that. But that core fan base wants to hear mixtape Dipset.
And also a question to both of you, of course. Whenever I heard a new mixtape, the most exciting things were the collaborations, not only when it comes to artist, but to the DJ and the artist. So when you have a dedication one, a dedication two, Gangsta Grills, when you have a DJ Who Kid linking up with a new artist, talk about that excitement for the hip hop fan base when it honestly felt like a comic book crossover event when you see your favorite stars do their thing.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I feel like I celebrate with this documentary for myself, for Malik, is the ability to own the story of the DJs, right? The story of mixtapes, which, we can't tell in an hour.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that part of the culture is still very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it belongs to us,
Yes.
right? It's not something that has broken mainstream, widespread. Like you got to really know hip hop and know the culture to be able to talk about
True.
mixtapes, to
Yeah.
be able to celebrate and talk about DJs in the culture.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
insider baseball, right? And I like that piece. I think that's what made me excited about my job when I worked at the source, right? Because I
Hmm.
always felt like we were a step ahead in terms of reporting on the culture, and that similarity in the work is what gets me excited about Tale of the Tape.
Yes, and one of the most exciting parts of the documentary were you guys touching on women in hip hop, how the mixtape was the avenue to get them further ahead, where sometimes they would get bogged down by their management or their record label or the albums. The mixtape was a safe haven for them just to spit like the most incredible bars and introduce themselves to a new audience. So talk about that, how the mixtape genre has impacted women in hip hop.
So I'll leave really quickly, but you know, I remember producing Rap City, and we were gonna have Nikki on the show. She had no album. It was just mixtape Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she was managed by Deb Antney at the time, and that's when she's like down with Wayne and Gucci Mane's crew or
Yeah.
whatever. And we were like the buzz and anticipation for her to come, and we were filming off on location, right? We were at a sneaker store in Queens somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and we were so excited and hyped for her, and everybody and couldn't wait until like we came back with the footage. The entire office wanted to watch, but the mixtape made that possible.
Yeah.
That's where she built her fan base. That's where that's where she uh got got her reps in, and being a part of whatever with Wayne and Gucci, she was holding her own.
Mm-hmm.
And again, only the mixtape can provide that sort of platform.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think, I also, I'm very big on whenever I do anything involving women and making sure women aren't erased from the narratives. And, that was something probably Malik could tell you one of the first things when we're going over the interview list is me saying, well, how many women do we have? Because I want to always make sure women have a
Mm-hmm.
voice in hip hop. So I think, yeah, that was definitely a part of our agenda, being able to talk to women, even Jazzy Joyce, right? Which
Yes.
she's a big part of the culture, especially when we're talking about DJing and mixtapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something we never want to lose sight of
Mm-hmm.
in hip hop.
Yeah, and then speaking a little bit more about Nicki Minaj and of course Lil Wayne, I say they're at a perfect cross point between uh albums are still really selling well, but the invention of YouTube and these other platforms are dominating. Talk about how the mixtape genre, it kind of exploded in a good way when it came to Facebook, MySpace, YouTube, TikTok. I could go on and on because obviously, when I was in high school, that first 2 years of high school, we had word of mouth. We've had, can you get it on a third, fourth party site? But tell us how about the inventions in technology kind of pushed the mixtape into an era where the previous generations didn't have the benefit of that.
I mean, when you look at what technology has done across the board in this industry, it's been prevalent for regular shows, not just mixtapes. I mean, think about how people would run home for whether it was Yo MTV Raps or 106 in Park.
Yes.
Right? Nobody's gonna go to watch that now because you can watch it on demand on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. You can watch it on the artist's own channel / platform, and
Yeah.
it kind of the mixtape morphed into something different and morphed more into playlist for these different, and we touch on it towards and part of the doc where you have the Spotify's and the titles and the Apple Music, and you have these different playlists that are curated more,
Mm-hmm.
some by staff at the spaces, some by an algorithm of what you've been listening to, and you can say, well, this is I'm Evan, and this is my play. This is the playlist that you made for me. Um, but I do think the DJ is not going anywhere, but things morph into a different space. You have D Nice, who has Club Quarantine, right? It's
Yeah.
IG based. It's a mix. It's a mix. It's just not in the physical form of a tape or CD.
Uh-huh.
Um, and sometimes you can go back and honestly, during the pandemic, to me, Questlove had the most amazing mixtapes that he would put on,
Mhm.
mix shows basically. He would do live. Him
Mhm.
and Knife Wonder. It was called the Fast Auntie series. Um, and but that's the way it's gone. It's going the way of digital.
Yeah.
It's a very different medium, but I do think it's something that's more digestible for the younger demo.
Mhm.
And Kim is a big fan of Club Quarantine. She made sure that that D Nice part had a prevalent part in here.
Yeah, because yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I'm just laughing at him trying to crack jokes at me. Um, you know, I do come from a certain era in terms of the mixtapes and what I believe a mixtape is.
Mm,
But listen, I'm not like technologically challenged. I think I'm pretty good with it. So I've been able to adapt to what mixtapes have become. And I
yeah.
do think we are in this new age digital era. And you see and you get a lot more of the user generated content, not just the DJs that we know and we're familiar with and
Yeah.
that are out there kind of like amassing their audiences and bringing them in through maybe their IG lives or whatever, their Twitch, whatever, however they're kind of deciding they want to put it out. But
Mhm.
even from fans that would never even have sort of the audience
Yeah.
for their own mixtapes, right? I
Mhm.
feel like the digital space has given a platform to people that don't have a voice, kind of like the way hip hop did. So I
Yeah.
feel like it's all coming from that same rooted hip hop energy that we all have. And it's a way, again, it connects people. It connects people in the music and the curation of music and how we digest the music. So I've seen it transform, and I am anxious to see where it's gonna go. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
That's what's so very fascinating because I find it ironic that a lot of corporations, obviously, we love albums, but a lot of corporations wouldn't want their artists to produce a mixtape, right? But you see now that the modern day mixtape in digital form is essentially TikTok. People are remixing and remaking and mixing and matching things all the time. But I want you to touch on touch on the fact that uh, how did the mixtape change marketing when it comes to not only the hip hop artists but the artist's brand when it comes to the public perception? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
So, one of the pivotal moments in mixtape history was the raid at DJ Drama's studio.
Hmm.
DJ Drama was one of the biggest, it still is one of the biggest mixtape DJs ever.
Definitely.
Super successful, helped launch the careers and improve the careers from T.I., Jeezy, Gucci. That Gangsta Grill series is
Hmm.
iconic, and I think that, when he got into that trouble, him and his affiliates from, him, Don Cannon, DJ Sense, um, I think it changed the way that one mixtapes were looked at from a legal standpoint. And even though technically he's like in bed with the labels, helping them
Hmm.
from a producing and marketing standpoint, there was these legal technicalities, and you have these departments that aren't speaking to each other. Whereas like you have one department basically trying to prosecute him, but the other department is
Hmm.
kind of like, no, he's our best friend because he helps blow these
Yeah.
artists up.
He
But
makes
yeah,
artists a bigger brand.
right. A much bigger brand, much bigger
Uh-huh.
profile. And honestly, just being, at times hip hop as an artist and as a new artist, it helps to be attached to somebody that has a strong brand. And being a part of the Gangsta Girl series or attached to Drama and those guys and the affiliates, that was important. That was important for these artists. So I think that was one of the major changes in how mixtape culture changed marketing in hip hop. I think they had to like cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's after that. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but then fast forward to like 50, he kind of just 50 is 50. He do what he want.
So
Yeah.
I'll just add to that, right? That
Hmm.
I think about it in terms of street marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So the street teams that used to be out throwing up stickers, to promote music back in the early 90s. This is how I envision it. It's direct to consumer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're talking directly to your audience and you're cutting out the middleman. So I think it gave artists sort of their freedom to be able to talk directly to their fans. And I think what you said about TikTok, that kind of rings true as well, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
artists they no longer need that middleman to speak directly to their fan base.
Yeah, and that's what's the fascinating part of indirectly following mixtapes, just being a fan of not only music but hip hop, is the influence. So talk about the influence of the mixtape beyond hip hop when it comes to globally, or to R&B artists, to pop artists also doing mixtapes of their own.
I mean, it's spread to where, if you're a basketball fan, you have the And One Street Ball mixtape.
Yeah.
There's a comedian in LA that does the mixtape comedy show.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think just the word mixtape is a brand within itself because, what it represents is creative freedom. It represents artistic ownership. And it's honestly normally the precursor to like huge success. So it just makes sense that other genres we're gonna like, kind of grab onto that. And let's not, I don't want it to get lost where it's like there have been a lot of like quote unquote R&B mixtapes from DJ
Mm-hmm.
SNS, DJ Craig G. They would do, reggae and one side reggae and one side R&B. DJ
Mm-hmm.
DJ Sense, Trendsetter Sense, that's with the affiliates and drama. He had rhythm and streets.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people focused on like the hip hop because it was just like blowing through the water, and you had all these artists that were like becoming huge success stories. But there's been other genres that have been put out during this prime mixtape era.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the gentleman, the comedian, his name is Royale Watkins,
Uh-huh.
that does the mixtape comedy show out of LA. Very, very amazing, great, great guy. So, but yeah, it gives you artistic ownership and creative
I
freedom.
thought that was so well put when you were asking about like outside of hip hop. I wasn't thinking on that
Yeah.
level, but
Huge.
when he started talking about the AM1 mixtape, I was like, right, that it translated into sports, and even the comedy tour. I don't even think I knew Royale had named his tour that. So I feel like I don't know. I don't have anything to add to that. Well said, Malik.
Right? One of the best parts of mixtapes to me, and you guys touch on this on the documentary, is the surprise element, right? Either two artists you wouldn't ever think of coming together, or artists like Pharrell doing Skateboard P going off on a Lil Wayne record, or an artist like Drake singing on his So Far Gone. What's a moment when it comes to your favorite mixtapes where it was surprising, almost shocking, but you loved it, and then you realized everybody else kind of caught on to that as well?
My favorite mixtape is Doo Wop 95 Live. Because one, Doo Wop is just one of my favorite DJs.
Mm-hmm.
Doo Wop, it was Doo Wop in the Bounce Squad, so he had his crew of artists, Unique, who's a female MC that is amazing, and then Snaggerpuss had this voice that was kind of like, this cool Pink Panther type sound, and Doo
Mm-hmm.
Wop could rap. But with 95 Live, it was like the first mixtape to where you had like artists, big artists getting on, um, almost like an underground mixtape, just because for the love of the culture. So you
Uh-huh.
have Raekwon, who's like blowing up with Wu-Tang. You have Fat Joe. You have Guru, who has already made a ton of albums with Gangstar. You have
Mm-hmm.
Busta Rhymes. You have all of these guys coming on, kind of like to form like X-Men in a sense,
Yeah.
right? Or the Justice League, I would just say.
Yeah.
You have all these superheroes in hip hop joining forces with one of the hottest DJs,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it just captured a moment. So to me, that's like my favorite one, and for all of those reasons.
Hmm.
I've been asked this question a few times. I think I want to change my favorites because, like, now the more I talk about the mixtapes, the more I start to remember.
Huh?
I always hate that. That's why when someone asks you, like, what's your top five? I'm like, don't ask me that question because it's gonna change every day. Like today, KRS-One is back in.
Hmm.
So like that's I'm not even kidding. And it's like I'm like, when did KRS-One fall out the top five for
Mm.
people? Because I remember there was a time, but again, it's the eras, right? So we're all kind of subject to our respective eras. So for me, I feel like, when mixtapes were remixing songs, matter of fact, a lot of the mixtapes that were out back then, I can't even tell you if it was the remix or if it was a mixtape because it's become embedded in like that Ron G, Mary J. Blige remix.
Hmm.
See, like I'm just thinking about it, like, was that her remix or was that on his tape first? You know, I
Yeah.
I can't remember specifically, but those mixes were just, I mean, that's what really, I mean, who really invented the remix? Was it
Hmm.
let me not say anything, but who really invented the remix? And I
I
feel
say
like,
I always say it's a combination of James Brown, Chuck Berry, in the last, if the modern form, the last 100 years of music, I feel like they just did things that were, you know, people can't even touch. That's why they have covers of their songs so much and don't get credit for some of their songs because they just did something that's out of this world that people couldn't help but to remix it itself. But that's just
well, quietly, if you go back to '89, they also invented hip hop.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
every single every single record, if
Mhm.
you really dug into it, was came from a James Brown sample.
Yes.
That
um
is true.
which is it, this is like the foundation of what it was for hip hop, borrowing elements of one, you know
Mhm.
of one form of music and building on that. So, and I feel like that, mixtapes fall in line with that as well.
And one of the most interesting elements of the documentary, like you said, a lot of these mixtapes and specifically a lot of these songs become bigger hits for these artists than their actual album singles or even hits. Talk about how that was a benefit to these artists, but maybe sometimes also an hindrance to them as well, as people were just they wanted that mixtape version of you. They didn't want the album version.
So to piggyback over what, Kim said earlier, like there's something that can't be measured when the streets speak.
Mm.
And when it comes to mixtapes, that's what these were. This was the people talking. And so like one of my favorite records is Jodeci Freaking You remix with the
Mm.
Wu-Tang, right? Couldn't find it anywhere but on a mixtape. Even today, like I don't when I'm listening to like the what I hear now on, I think it's on Tidal, it's a mixtape version. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I say that to say, I think it could only be a benefit for, what mixtapes can do for an artist. Because at the end of the day, pop music is really just, it could be any genre, it's just
Yeah.
popular. And
Yeah.
then when
Pop,
it's
popular
not,
music of the
then
time.
when it's not, you're back to the genre that you came out of.
Mhm.
And so it's helpful to still have your mixtape catalog
Mhm.
that you can, ride out for, and you can still be a legacy artist. I think it's only a benefit.
Mhm.
Oh, I definitely heard that part. I think again, like when we were talking about, what was it, 50 Cent is the future?
Mhm.
Yes.
That mixtape, yeah. When we were talking about, just how impactful that tape was, and I'm digging into my memory here, but what I think that tape preceded his deal with
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shady Aftermath, right?
Mhm.
So that tape was a big part, if my memory serves me correctly, that tape was a big part of his getting signed,
Mhm.
right?
Huge part.
Um,
Major.
although, yeah, although obviously, like he went in, he got with Dr. Dre, and then the rest is history,
Mhm.
right? But from what I can remember, the energy and the feeling of who he was on that mixtape was what they wanted to convey with the album. And I think it was very similar. I just think you had, the added the big budget, the big tracks of your own, right? But
Yeah,
it was still the same energy
yeah,
that he was giving you.
yeah, and it was still in the, you could argue it was still in the shiny suit era where a lot of hip hop acts wanted to, and their labels wanted to link with either Mariah Carey, or they wanted to combine and mainstream and commercialize hip hop further. But the biggest thing about a mixtape is authenticity. And obviously with the Kendrick and Drake beef, it was a conversation people were having, like, these aren't the best mixes, these aren't the most polished songs, but that's why I love it, because
Right.
they're shooting from the hip. Talk about, give your take on how the mixtape has even influenced that battle as well. That
You
rap.
know, I'll be brief, but I'll say that it absolutely has influenced that battle from, to me, for like street culture. Like Kendrick knew what people wanted to hear, just like DJs knew what people wanted to hear for their mixtapes. And I think that's how he planned his attack and to do what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
And just to add to that, I would say the timing of the drops
Yes.
really kind of,
Yeah.
as the way that they were dropped, the timing of I mean, it was so
Mhm.
well planned out. On both of their parts. Now, I mean, you could say one kind of one up the other.
What's interesting about the documentary and what I love the most is that you had J. Cole, you had Big Sean, you have other artists in the last, I say, 10 to 15 years who had mixtapes of their own and they've had time to reflect on it. Um, how do you think uh, those artists in those eras from the 2000s and 2010s learn how to, utilize the mixtape differently than their predecessors?
So I think that and Cole and Kendrick, we have them separately on a panel, years ago,
Hmm.
um, at a hip hop event. It was really about their message was to, like, especially Cole was like, you got to keep putting out this music
Yes.
as things changed, like from a cult, like a technology standpoint,
Hmm.
able to like transition with it. You know what I mean? And so what I think they did was they looked at the basis and the foundation of what G Unit did and
Hmm.
what Joe Budden did, what Dipset did, and they said, hey, this is how we're gonna like help this translate to our generation, because that is a different generation, you know.
Hmm.
And I do think from, Cole, being a business marketing guy at St. John's, he kind of had things formulated in his head of how he wanted to do it. I
Most
think
definitely.
Kendrick was more like, yo, I'm going on LA and this is going to be my space. You know what I mean? And he was able to touch the people. And but they both were, look, especially Cole hopping in his car, driving it down. He treated it like it was a real album. That's
Hmm.
another. He just didn't treat it like like
Yeah.
it was something, for free that he was just giving away. This was his art that was near and dear to him. He treated it as such. It was received as such, and
Hmm.
I think that's what made all the difference.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everything evolves with time. And I feel like I'm really proud, I think, of what the artists of today's culture have done, just in terms of taking the art form and continuing to change with it as it relates
Hmm.
to what's going on with technology. So yeah, I feel like they're just kind of building on that foundation.
Hmm. And then also talk about the impact, how maybe an unknown artist or regional artist in any era, their mixtape can almost make them a superstar overnight. Obviously, nothing happens overnight, but it becomes apparent to the hip hop or music fan base. This artist, this person is onto something great, and we hadn't heard of him or her before.
I think it's important for artists to like own their region first. because nobody's gonna lift you up like your hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like I always say, if you look at the NBA and the guy at the end of the bench, when he played in high school, the town shut down for him
Mm-hmm.
because he was that guy, you know, and it has to be that same way in music and in hip hop, to where your block, your neighborhood, your peers that you went to school with, they all need to champion you. That's all super helpful. But of course, you know, having a great product and being talented also helps.
Yes.
And then with today being able to like go viral, it can speed up the process, so to
Yeah.
speak, a lot faster. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there was a story before where you know, Will Smith talked about back in his day, like they didn't have a real metric for how well
Mm-hmm.
the song was doing. So they didn't know until they performed it in the venue
Wow.
and then saw the reaction. Whereas now today you might have an artist like I hope I'm pronouncing his name wrong, La Russell,
Mm-hmm.
right? He actually shows like, you know, hey, this is my song and this is where it's
Yeah.
strong at. And so that's where he goes to do his performances. So that's where he sells the most of his merch.
Mm-hmm.
And where he knows to like leak the next record to, because he's able to he doesn't have to, like, you know, there's a system in place that can help dictate that for him for his formula of success. And so I think that's like really helpful now with technology, that these artists are able to kind of use. But again, having your hometown behind you and then a couple smart people next to you, and you know what you're, you know, and having a good product.
But I thought LaRussell was a great example there again, just of how someone can, do what he does in that particular regions and cater what he's doing based off of the metrics that are coming in, and do it independently, right? It really kind of shows you how, I mean, I don't want to say this, 'cause I have a lot of friends at record labels, but how how
I'll
let me
say
say it politically correct.
I'll
How
say it next
record
for you. I got a question.
Right. How record labels need to adjust their thinking in terms of the promotion of artists, right? There
Mm-hmm.
was a time where they marketed artists on radio, started with college radio, right? How did
Mm-hmm.
you do that? What does that look like in 2024? It's much different, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think artists, particularly the younger artists like the La Russells, are leading the charge in how and what the new formula is for
Mm-hmm.
promoting locally first.
Very true. And then you alluded to it a bit, but I guess putting myself in the executive or music label shoes, if they don't want you to release a mixtape and you release a mixtape, you're almost pulling your hair out. But ironically, in my opinion, that always works in best in favor for the artist and the label. Tell touch about that a bit, where in your own experience or doing the documentary, you felt like, all right, the music labels at some point understood the importance of the mixtape and started embracing it more.
Um, so I think that and it's, you know, it's funny because you look at an R&B artist like Frank Ocean, I don't think he becomes as huge of a star without Channel Orange mixtape, right? It was a mixtape. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm sorry, it wasn't Channel Orange, but his first mixtape, he doesn't become
Yeah,
a
nostalgia.
huge star. Nostalgia, excuse me. Yeah. But I think that, you know, I think it started after Drama's raid. I think
Mm-hmm.
labels and departments understood the power of what
Yeah.
mixtapes could do for their artists, because, you know, again, you know, 50 Cent and G Unit and those guys, what they, you know, their deals were a little bit different. They were like, you know, uh, uh sort of underground, right? They were being distributed on some in the
Mm-hmm.
streets, Land Speed and Koch. And but to be honest, those they helped blow those labels up
Mm-hmm.
to where, you know, now they have bigger distributors and bigger platforms. So, but I do think around that, you know, drama era is where the labels and the execs took a lot more notice, and where you had even, you know, people who ran R&B departments and, you know, reggae departments, etc. They were like, okay, we need in on this, and it kind of changed the paradigm of the business model.
Most
You know,
definitely.
I think these days, right, and what I do in the TV space, I liken a lot of the production companies that we work with to record labels. And we are always trying to sell, and
Mm,
we're always trying to pitch. And it's challenging, right? Because
mhm.
one of the lyrics that um always sticks with me in my whole career, I just walk around all day and it's a rap lyric in my head. But it's the Jizzalon. Who's your A&R? Mountain climber who plays an electric guitar, right?
Mm.
Malik likes when I rap. That that feeling of always having to tell the production company or the label what's driving the culture and what we're forecasting is going to be next is something that I pride myself on, even in the television industry today.
Mhm,
So with this mixtape doc, this is yet another example for us, right? Tail of the tape is you need to watch it because,
mhm.
right? So that it's the same hustle that we're reporting on, right? That's the hustle that we have in putting this out. It's being able to say, okay, the big bad label or the big bad production company doesn't see it,
Mhm.
right? Malik as Red Summer did. But when you get into the labels, we're like, I would say that boutique, we're like G Unit, and the bigger production company is like Shady.
Yeah,
And then the bigger production company on top of that is
yeah.
Aftermath. And
Classic
then you
tale of
go to
David
the
and Goliath.
right. And then you go to the Interscope, right? And so we're starting out at that grassroots level
Uh-huh.
of we're gonna put this out ourselves,
Mhm.
right? So that it's the same that we're following that model,
Yeah.
even in doing this.
Yeah, and I'm following the model too with Young, Bold, and Regal because I independently created, which was originally a blog 12 years ago. And I told myself, how am I going to compete with the Peoples, the Essence, the Vogues? And I says, I'm going to do it exactly how my favorite mixtape artists and geniuses behind that do it. I'm going to do it one person at a time. And I'm going to use different tactics and do guerrilla marketing of YBR so I'm on the same press line with them. Talk about that effect too when it comes to hip hop. And you mentioned X-Men earlier. If you think of Avengers, the Thanos of the early 2000s was a Jay-Z selling crazy amount of records, right? And you say a part of the Avengers, the people who are coming up who want to be on top, were the 50 Cents and a lot more other artists as well. Tell us how that artists coming up would almost usurp the biggest artist on the planet. Tell us about that as well, because I think that is the number one byproduct of having a mixtape is that you become the popular conversation, and the popular conversation of the time is still popular, but you almost have a cachet, a certain credibility more so than them.
50 has been the master of marketing. And from that song, How to Rob, which was also like, a mixtape that predated the other mixtape that got him the bigger deal. I think that was really, really important in his career. It was really a spinoff to me of, Biggie's Dreams record,
Mm-hmm.
where he was talking about different R&B women. But, 50 was talking about different hip hop guys. And
Yeah,
I think he was poking at people to see who
yeah.
was going to respond. It could only go up for him because he didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a deal at the time. So it was only going to increase his visibility. And it ends up what? He ends up doing a collabo record for sneakers with the artist he's trying to surpass.
Yeah.
American Story can only happen in the land of the mixtape.
Mm.
That's where it spawns from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it was very important. As great of a song as it was, it hit at the right time. It
Mm-hmm.
was in the summertime. I remember hearing it. I'm in the park in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy on Halsey Street, and I'm like, oh wow.
Hmm.
He's that next guy.
Yeah.
Um, Now has he surpassed Jay? That's debatable.
Yeah.
But it did put him in another realm. Uh,
Hmm.
and again, only, that can only happen from the grassroots street level marketing of what a mixtape does, because it also represents the underdog. Everybody roots for the underdog.
Hmm.
I just to add to that, I would say, there's always a changing of the guards, right? And when you talked about Jay-Z as the Thanos at that particular time, and those guys coming up under and trying to take his spot, right? I can remember a time where Jay-Z was the underdog,
Hmm.
right? He was signed to Priority Records, and he was trying to be in the spot that Mace was in.
Hmm.
Right? He was trying to be in the spot that DMX was in.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting to just look at the hustle of the underdog in this game, and how there's always this flip, right? And so, once you're on top, you've kind of achieved it, but you also need to know that you're coming down.
Hmm.
We just saw it a couple of weeks ago,
Hmm.
right? And people are shocked, but it's just the nature of the game.
It is.
And that's, what I'm saying. You can take that back to early mixtapes, when
Hmm.
people were dropping their mixtapes, and DJs were dropping their mixtapes, and they
Yeah.
were battling for the top spot. That's what, what I'm saying. It's always, hip hop always breeds a very competitive spirit,
Hmm.
right? And I think that fuels the game, and it fuels the money even
Hmm.
within it.
And
So yeah, a lot to unpack, I think, when you start talking about just that type of mentality in hip hop, and that type of hustle.
that's very true, because I was talking to a friend the other day. She was in her mid 20s, and I said, mixtapes, albums, songs would end other rappers' careers, and she was like, "What do you mean by that?" I was like, "It wouldn't necessarily end their career with it not having another album come out, but the public perception of them would change, and the pendulum switches over to a 50 Cent or to a Lil Wayne or back to a Pusha T and then back to that artist, whomever." So talk about the competitiveness of hip hop when it comes to mixtapes, where you feel like, oh yeah, that person was definitely dissing that other person, but the whole album, the whole mixtape is filled with them just relentlessly going in on their competitors. Tell us about and I like to say it that rather than a diss, because it's a competition. Tell us more about the competition when it comes to mixtapes.
So I'll talk about the competition between, and there were some disses between 50 Cent and Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
It started because basically, and ironically enough, I felt like, 50 Cent kind of like downplayed what um what Cameron and Dipset were doing, with like from a label perspective, right? Because like I said, some of their stuff was on like E1 and Koch, and even, you could be an artist on a major label, but some people on a independent can be getting a way bigger cut. You don't have to sell as many albums. You can do what you want to
Yeah.
do. You have the freedom to do however you like, and you're getting a bigger cut, as opposed to being with the larger machine with a lot of moving parts, but you're getting something less. And I'm not saying that that's what 50 has, but that's where their beef kind of started at.
Mm-hmm.
I was a producer for the song Curtis, produced the music video.
Yeah.
When Cameron is, he literally he had a scene where he's in the coffin, and then he's riding on top of his car and he's in Harlem yelling Curtis. Like, all of that started from basically saying who's the best artist, not just in New York, but in the region, and who's done it best on mixtapes.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that battle, which I'm sure will probably spark up again at some point, is the most memorable in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's the most memorable battle in your opinion?
Yes, from mixtapes. I mean, I know which one you're gonna say.
What? No, tell me what you think I'm
So,
gonna say.
you're gonna say the the state property versus yeah, you're gonna say the state property one.
Isn't it
First the locks.
isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing how this this beef, this Kendrick and Drake beef,
Mm-hmm.
has been likened to that beef of all the see it a lot online of all the battles, I should say, that we witnessed
Mm-hmm.
within hip hop culture. I saw a lot of comparison to Beans and Jada.
Mm.
And I don't, you know, I was trying to figure out why that was,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know if it's that bar for bar they felt like lyrically both, those guys in that time. And I wasn't gonna say that, Malik. I was actually gonna say, but when you brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been talking about Beans and Jada online ever since this Kendrick and Drake thing. I
Mm-hmm.
actually saw something that said, what which battle was better bar for bar, and they said Kendrick and Drake or Beans and Jada. I said, wow, today's audience is feeling like that battle was that high caliber.
Mm-hmm.
But and then when you talked about the Cameron and G Unit thing, I wanted to say, I don't know, I think it's common knowledge, or maybe it's not, that a lot of what 50, I believe, was going to do or want to do was sort of cut short after he signed to the label, right? Because it was almost like the label was, hey, one beef at a time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We
Hey,
think it's, they were in a boardroom.
now it seems like the opposite, in my opinion.
Right. I think if we go after that guy, it's going to be a lot,
Mm-hmm.
easier, right? And
Yeah.
Listen, I'm speculating, but I think that there might be some truth to what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
These battles, these beefs, they become legendary, and they really, you can see by the numbers that Kendrick just broke just how influential they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just how memorable they are,
Mm-hmm.
because there is so much to impact. So I feel like, that, and it's not going to end with this. I think we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going.
And then a couple more questions for you guys. What was the funnest part about making this documentary? Not only an executive producer or a director, but your relationship with the mixtape.
I mean, we had a lot of shoots for this mixtape. And if I had to like pick out one, it's probably when I interviewed Craig G at a pizza shop in Connecticut. And then I went a couple doors down to a place called Toad's and watched Fabulous perform that night. He pretty much performed a bunch of his mixtape,
Yeah.
his mixtape classics. I'm a Golden State Warriors fan. I watched the game on TV there. Like it was, it was like the perfect night for a hip hop head, in my opinion. I'm a big Craig G fan. He's really amazing guy. He's on the radio in Connecticut. He's very insightful. And again, we've done a lot of traveling for this. All over the place. New York, Atlanta, LA, everywhere. But that's just one that sticks out to me because it was just so like it just felt more just so organic. And I go into the pizza shop, he's running a little late. He called them for me. There's a food spread, and we just sat down and really had a conversation. I don't want to call it an interview. We just had a conversation, and he just put me on the game.
That's really dope.
I would say that I love the storytelling process in post, right? And so being able to see what we have, kind of script out the order, the flow of the story, things like deciding who was going to do the VO, right? Royce has a very clean voice, but it's recognizable, but not too recognizable, right? It takes you a second before you're like, wait a minute, that's Royce. Because as a producer, we look for ways to complement the story, right? I think that is such an important piece of when we're crafting this and putting it together, just who's going to be able to deliver the vision of what we're trying to say. These are the creative decisions that we're like making when we're going through the doc, right? And trying to figure out what's going to be the best execution for us of this. Like what's going to capture the viewer, what's going to keep people glued to it and be able to digest what we're telling them.
And then I remember when I went to New York when I was 13, and then I saw just an array of mixtapes on a table, people trying to sell them, and I felt like I just seen a gold mine, right? And my future of mixtapes is the soul tape being on streaming platforms, and not only that, but these mixtapes being in museums and talking about a singular art form. But I wanted to ask you both, Malik and Kim, what do you think the future of the mixtape is?
I think that, and we've been fortunate enough to see it transition again to, a digital base slash platform, with, on our titles, on our Spotify's, on our Apple Musics. I do think that, there'll be a new crop of DJs that will pop up that will be able to do their mixes and release them there. And, I think that's how we'll hopefully share. That's where I see this going.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sky's the limit, right? Like I see it going to a place where users who I see so many producer hopefuls online. And I could see a lot of them crafting music and digitally distributing that music in their own mixtape form. And that could be something that again kind of gives people without a voice their platform to be the next DJ.
Most definitely. So thank you, Kim. Thank you, Malik, from Red Summer TV. Everybody go check out Tale of the Tape, how the mixtape revolutionized hip hop. Check it out on Prime Video, on Spectrum, and Verizon. And any last thoughts from you guys about the documentary?
I would like to just, one, thank you for having us.
Yes.
We are very, very fortunate and privileged to be able to put this out into the world. Again, we want everybody to have an opportunity to stream it. You can go to taleoftheTapeFilm.com to find updates on it and also find links to stream whatever platform of your preference. Please go to the IG page, Tale of the Tape Film, and Red Summer TV for a lot of behind the scenes footage and to get updates on our next projects. That was for me.
Thank you, Evan, for your time. I just, to reiterate that, everybody go watch it. Comment, like, and share. That's what everybody says, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes.
one last note to the audience: that meme that you post, that song over Jalen Brunson crossing over somebody, it's because of the mixtape. The mixtape is its own art form, and it redefined hip hop and the world by sharing experiences and mixing and matching things you didn't think possible. So you're welcome from everybody from the mixtape world. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Malik. Thank you, Red Summer TV. We will talk to you next time.
Thank you, Evan.
All right, thank you.